What gets your attention? Seriously, what gets your attention? Like, what would it take to get your attention? This is the question that I asked my kids. We were in the car, and I said, "Hey, just doing some research. What would it take to get your attention? Like, what do you pay attention to?" And they immediately said, "Fun things. Fun gets my attention." Okay. They said, interesting things get my attention. So things that are interesting, I will pay attention to. One of them said, new things get my attention. I like new things, and we all like new things, and they get our attention. And then one of them said, things that are helpful to me or help me get my attention. And then I immediately, start to think, well, what about all the things that I'm helping you with my advice? And how... it doesn't seem like you're paying attention. And so when she said that got my attention. But, further, there are certain things that get our attention. Sometimes those things are shocking, like it's just a shock wave, and, we go, oh, my goodness, did you see? Sometimes beauty gets our attention, like a piece of art or a great movie, or, just we observe something and we go, wow, that's beautiful, like that gets my attention. Maybe it's an opportunity. And you've been either waiting for it or it just kind of showed up and it got your attention. And a lot of times, the important things, tend to get our attention. Do you know who has our attention? TikTok has our attention, okay? 1.6 billion users worldwide, which is more than Twitter and LinkedIn and some other social media site that I guess still has followers. But that's 1.6 billion people, on average, 44 minutes a day. 44 minutes a day. So I think it's safe to say that TikTok has attention, has people's attention, and actually, it might, contribute to lowering attention span because it's short form video, 15 seconds, 10 seconds, and then 2 or 3 seconds in, maybe 1 second. It's like, if I don't like that, if that doesn't catch my attention, swipe, scroll, whatever it is, and then until something gets your attention. And so really, maybe the question isn't what gets your attention. The question really then is, well, what keeps your attention? What keeps your attention? Like, what moves you to want to engage more in something? Or like maybe into action, or to just engulf yourself in it. I know what would get your attention in that sort of way. In California recently, there was a gas station, and the manager accidentally priced per gallon the premium gas 69 cents instead of $6.99 in the computer system, and they couldn't change it. And for the next 3 hours, the gas station lost $16,000 as people sort of turned this mistake into a chaos and a frenzy, because that would get your attention. Somebody would text you, you would text somebody, but you better get gas here, hurry up before it's all gone, that sort of thing. I don't know what's happening, but we're pumping gas, because we don't like the price of gas and all of that. And so we'd be in for that. That would get our attention. It would move us to action. So seriously, what gets your attention? Maybe a way that we would say it is, what do you pay attention to? And one of my favorite authors and pastors read this book a couple of years ago. John Mark Comer wrote this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. If you haven't read this, you need to add this to your library. It is an amazing book. But this particular quote in the book has captured my attention since I read it a couple of years ago, and here's the quote. What has your attention has your devotion. Whatever has your attention has your devotion. What is he saying? We pay attention to the things that we are devoted to, and we devote ourselves to the things that we pay attention to. And have you ever stopped to think about what that phrase, and we use it regularly, pay attention means, like the implications of that phrase? Well, the implications of that phrase is that there is a cost to your attention. There is resource exchange going on, because you only have so much energy, you only have so much time, you only have so much talent, you only have so much money or resources or opportunities, and these are limited. And so when we pay attention to something, it's costing us, right? It's costing us some of those valuable, limited resources. And you do this on a daily basis. You may not realize it. Sometimes you realize it maybe for the bigger things. But before you and I invest in something, our resources, our time, our energies in something, we ask some questions. We ask, will this activity, or will this financial investment, or will this job choice, or this project I'm thinking about taking on, will this relationship that I'm thinking about, working on or adding to my life, or putting this in my calendar, or deciding to join this, or commit to this, or do this, or decide this, we sort of ask this question, maybe under the surface, maybe sometimes we know what we're asking it. What will be the return on my investment? If I pay attention to this, if I, put energy into this, what's the ROI going to be? What's going to be my return? We want to know what our return is going to be because we only have so much time, so much energy, so much ability to invest in things. And so we ask that question, what's the return going to be? If I spend 44 minutes a day on TikTok, what is the return in my life? What if I spend all this time and money, going, being involved and invested in sports or my kids' sports, and maybe I have a gym membership and I pay for that and I go a couple of times a week. You think about it, you go, what's my return for all of that investment, right? Like we want a return. We don't just want to give away all of that. We want it to return something. We think about this when we think about who we want to spend time with, who we want to have relationships with, where we want to work, where we want to go to church, how involved do we want to be in church, or do we want to be part of this or part of that? We're constantly asking the question because we have limited amount of resources, we have limited amount of attention, what will the return be? And you want a return. We all want a return from our devotion. And that's not bad because it's an investment and we want some kind of return. And so we're constantly wondering, every decision we make, every time we pay attention to something or don't pay attention to something, will I get a return? And do I want that return? Constantly, all the time. And when the return is good and we judge that we like it, do you know what that does? That makes us reinvest and go, that was a good investment. I'm going to do that again because I want what it brought me. And so I'm going to be engaged with that. I'm going to keep coming back for that. And kind of the problem in this mindset, though, is we live in a world, and we're sort of becoming wired this way, that we want returns, but we want short-term returns. We want limited input, maximum return, right? We want quick solutions, quick fixes, a little bit of focus, a little bit of energy, everything I ever want and need. I mean, that's just kind of how we work. What is that called? That is called immediate gratification. And before we start saying, my kids are like this, we might want to look kind of in the mirror and go, whoa, that's a little bit like me too. And what this is and how this plays out is that whatever you're a part of, whatever you're invested in, a relationship, a job, whatever, if we don't start to see it, if we don't start to see something soon, we're out. We're thinking about getting out. And we don't just do this with TikTok. Okay, we don't, harmless entertainment, whatever. We're tempted to swipe right on relationships. We're tempted, the moment we don't feel returns or feel like it's benefiting us, we're prone to say, I'm done with that. With people, with important relationships. We do this with God. The moment that we look at God and we go, hey, your way, I get it, but it's not meeting me now. And I can't keep waiting for your way to work out. And so I'm just going to stop that. It's not meeting my needs, so I'm just going to give up on that. And we do this with churches too. The moment that, well, you're not meeting my needs or you're not doing what I need you to do, we're out. We're out. We all choose to pay attention to something. We all have to invest in something. We all have to devote to certain things. And by doing that, that means you can't devote and you can't pay attention to and you can't invest in other things. Because you and I, we can't pay attention to everything. We can't. Or even everything equally. or just don't have enough resources to be able to do that. So there will be some things that you can't, you shouldn't, or you don't pay attention to, and that's a cost. In order to pay attention to some things, you're going to have to pay a cost. You're going to have to pay a deficit. All of us are going to incur an attention deficit in our lives. We're going to have to pay attention, and there's going to be a deficit. And we all are wondering, what should we pay attention to? And when we do that, we're also saying, what shouldn't we pay attention to as well? And the temptation is for us to invest in things, in habits, and behaviors that don't return anything, like long term. They might return something like right now, but it's diminishing and it's actually a problem going forward. So let me ask this question again. What has your attention? And is what you're investing in, is what you're devoted to, this is so important, is what you're devoted to, is it returning or is it costing you the life that you want? Is it costing you the marriage that you want? Is it costing you a relationship with God that you say that you want? Is what you're investing in, what you're paying attention to, what you're devoted to, is it returning? Or is it costing you the life that you want? Is what you're paying attention to, is that, in fact, what you want your devotion to be? Now, a couple of weeks ago, we started this series. It's called Unmistakable. And in this series, we are looking for marks, not just any marks, but specific marks that marked a movement. We are comparing and contrasting what? We're comparing and contrasting our church and our century right here and now with the early church and in its century. And we are learning, what did they do? What did they have? What would it look like for us to have those things? And so we've been going through the first part of the book of Acts. And I just want you to understand that the book of Acts isn't just some random collection in your Bible. Okay, this was an intentional, I sat down to write it for a purpose because I'm a physician, Luke, a historical document that was later included into the Bible. It records the history of the early church. It records the group of people who followed Jesus, who witnessed Jesus preparing to launch a new kingdom. Now, this kingdom that Acts is all about, this kingdom does not decay. This kingdom does not break down. In this kingdom, there is freedom available to everyone. There is freedom from everything. There is freedom from agony. There is freedom from sin. There is hope in this kingdom because of the resurrection of Jesus. There is a new way, and this kingdom will cross borders, and it will go to the ends of the earth. It will be empowered by the Holy Spirit, and the kingdom is called the church. And 3,000 people who were devout, God-fearing Jews traveled to Jerusalem, and they just said yes to following Jesus. And when they said yes to following Jesus, they were saying yes to a new devotion. They were saying yes to a new way of living because the good news, the gospel, the truth that all can be forgiven and everything can be new got their attention. And it should get our attention as well because Jesus claimed to be God. And he rose from the dead and he reversed the curse. And then he says things to us like, my yoke is easy. My burden is life. And he whispers to us, there's a better way of life, and it's me. It's following me. You can be new. You can be loved. You are loved. You have a purpose and a place in my kingdom. And so all of these people recently turned to Jesus, make him their Lord and their Savior, their King and their Master. They say, we need to follow you because you have the answers to life. And here's where we find them in Acts chapter 2, verse 41. You can turn there or tap there on your phone. Here's what it says. Those who accepted his message, Peter's message about Jesus being king, were baptized. Now, they turned to Jesus. They had a run-in with who Jesus was, who he is, in their lives. And now this group of people that has said yes to Jesus, they now have a choice. And it's the very same choice that all of us have when we have a run-in with Jesus. Whether you are a believer, you're a curious person, you're not a believer at all in God or Jesus. Whenever you have a run-in with Jesus, whenever someone brings up Jesus, whenever that happens, whenever it's happening right now, there's a choice we all get to make, and it's the very same choice that they were getting to make right after they said yes to Jesus. Here's what it is. You can either invest in it. So you can make a decision for Jesus. You can hear about how Jesus can change your life, and you can decide, yep, I'm doing that because there's no other way to freedom. There's no other way that I can go where someone has the words of life, and I need to follow that way. I'm in. I'm all in. I'm investing. Or you could go, do I wait? Like some of this, it seems good. I've got a couple of questions, or I see how that's a good practice, but I just don't want to give that up yet. And so we go, should I wait? Should I wait to invest? Should I wait to just kind of go all in? Like I'm kind of good with all the beliefs and stuff, but as far as moving from belief to follow, I'm gonna wait. Or we could plausibly say, do I invest in something else? I'm not sure this is the way. And so that's what's happening with this group of people. They're asking, what do I return to in light of what we just experienced, in light of who we just experienced? What do we do now that we said, okay, Jesus, you're King, you're Lord? What do we do? Do we go back to our old routines? Do we, go back to our old practices, the way we used to worship God? What does life need to look like now in light of the kingdom? Because remember, these people were from all over the world. And so they're sort of asking this question. What will the return be if I embrace fully? What will the implications be if I say yes to Jesus and the way of Jesus and his kingship in my life? What will the return be if I embrace fully? And so Luke writes this down, and this is the very first time the church has anything written about it in a form of observation. This is what these people decided. And this is so important as we think about what the church should look like, what our Christianity should look like, what it looks like to follow Jesus after we say yes to Jesus. And here's what they did. Acts 2:42. They devoted themselves. They said, we're in. We're going all in. In fact, we're reorganizing everything in our lives around this because we see what God is doing. And now we want to use our time and our energy and our resources to further it. We're not going back home. We're starting something new. What are they doing? They are repenting. What is repenting? They are rethinking everything in light of the kingdom of God and the cross of Jesus and how the fact that there is a true new way because of resurrection, how that affects everything that they do. And so they're rethinking this, including their investments. They're rethinking, what should we be investing in? What should we be investing our time in? Who should we be investing in? What needs to be rethought in my life in light of who Jesus is, the way he has promised for me? How do my relationships need to be rethought? How I treat people, who I invest in? I frequent some places in my life. How does that need to be rethought? Or I spend my energy and my time and my eyeballs on something. How does that need to be rethought in light of the fact that Jesus is my King and I'm following his way? What will I pay attention to? If I take part, what will I have to part with? Everything. If you're a follower of Jesus or you're aspiring to follow Jesus, it all needs thought. And so we need to be thinking things like, what habits do I need to start in light of who Jesus is and what he's done and what he's promised me? What habits do I need to stop? What needs do I need to rethink? What's good for me? What's not good for me? All of this needs to be filtered in and through the person and the way of Jesus. And so here are these followers, new to Jesus, fully embracing the way of Jesus, and they're devoting themselves to a set of things. Here's what they're devoting themselves to: the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. The apostles' teaching. They were constantly and consistently gathering around what the leaders of the church, the people who are with Jesus, had to say about Jesus and what it means to follow Jesus. And they couldn't get enough. In fact, there was nowhere else to go because the New Testament wasn't written yet, and so they had to gather around these guys so they can know what it looks like to be a follower, a fully devoted follower of Jesus. And so they were just so devoted to what these guys had to say, and they were like, we got to know, because everything needs to be rethought in light of who Jesus is and what he's done. So tell us, we've got to know this way. We've got to know this kingdom that doesn't decay. I need that in my life. And then they were committed to prayer. So public, praying together, seeking God, asking God, petitioning God, worshiping God through prayer. They were doing this privately as well. They just had this commitment of, we're going to have a relationship with God. If we're going to follow the way of God, we should probably be talking to God. And by the way, God will start talking to us. And then they also had this practice of breaking bread. Now, this could be intentional in that they were celebrating communion, remembering the death and, the body of Jesus, and then they had a meal around it. This could also just refer to, hey, they gathered frequently to relate and eat. Why? Because they're human. And that's what we were designed to do. And then there's this word that I really want to focus on called fellowship. It's not what you think it means. In fact, I would probably wager a lot of money that most of us in this room would get this wrong if we were asked to define this, because I got this wrong as well a time or two. It is not just hanging out and talking to other people that believe in Jesus. That's not what fellowship is, okay? It's a part of it, but it's not what it is. What is fellowship? Well, it's a Greek word that we don't have a word for in the English language. It's the word koinonia. What is koinonia? This is what they were devoted to. They were devoted to koinonia. Here's what it is. It's a mutual, intimate participation where we contribute and we receive. That's a lot more loaded of a meaning than the word fellowship. That's what this word means. It's this vision of a community relationship where people are committed to each other, they're committed to helping each other, they're committed to the kingdom of God, they're committed to gathering and investing and serving and receiving and helping and worshiping and furthering this movement. And I just have to say this, God's kingdom movement, which is what the book of Acts records, which is what the church is not individual. It's communal. In our Western minds and our individualistic culture so badly wants to make faith and practicing faith this individual experience. And I'm just telling you, you cannot fully experience Jesus or the way of Jesus without community. You can't experience it privately. You can get some of it, but you're going to miss out on this devotion. Without the koinonia, the body, that's what the church is. When we invest in the body, guess what? It makes us better. And we should invest in it. Now look what happens when this group of people is devoted to these things. Verse 43. Everyone, it doesn't say some of them, every one of them was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. And you won't catch this in your English Bible. If you look in the Greek, the first word of this sentence and the last word of this sentence are the exact same word. Probably intentional, right? The word is agoneto. And King James tries to translate this as they kept feeling. And so what we're understanding is this deposit of attention and devotion, it was producing transformation. It was producing a result. It was returning a yield. It was edifying a body. And there was this cycle of we were devoted to, and then we were filled with. And we kept doing this, and then these wonders were happening because of our devotion and our attention and our participation in this. And this is what was happening. Let me give you a picture of it. This applies to probably every habit, every devotion in your life. There's a cycle of investment that you adhere to, that I adhere to, and it starts with attention. We pay attention to something. And then the next step is to devote to that something, whatever it is we want to give, because it interests us or it benefits us. And then what we hope is that we're investing in this, so continuing to devote. And then we hope to experience returns of our devotion. And if those returns are good, then we're going to keep reinvesting and keep fueling the good that we're feeling because we're devoted to this and it's reaping this. We're practicing this and we're seeing this. This is the cycle. This is what koinonia means. This is what it looked like to be a part of the kingdom. It was a continual investment and participation that was overflowing into the life of people. And anybody that was involved in that would say, man, that's so worth it. And look, you would say that too. Look at the picture of this. Here's what the result of this kind of living. Here's what it is. All the believers, imagine this, were together. And they had everything in common. And they sold property. Have you ever done that? They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. And every day, they continued to meet together in the temple courts, and they broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. This group of people, the early church, had a rhythm of investing. What were they investing? They were giving. They were giving their attention. They were giving their resources. They were giving what they had. They were serving. It was daily. It was continued. They were all in this. And what were the returns? Unity, deep relationships, like a family vibe. Don't you sense that? There was just this togetherness, and there was gladness, like this joy, and there was sincerity, and then everybody outside of the community looked in on this community, and they were just, people liked having them around. They had favor with them, and there was something interesting about them. And then there was transformation happening. Everyone was filled with awe, and needs were being met, emotional and relational and spiritual, even practical, physical needs were being met, and they ate good food. Why would you, don't you want to be a part of this? Isn't this what we were designed for? This kind of community. And so they lived this life where they were devoted to the community that followed Jesus, and they kept resulting in more and more and more of this kind of atmosphere, And isn't this the family that we all crave? And if you're not a believer, if you're rethinking faith, at least admit, this is kind of interesting. If you were to experience this kind of community, it would be so compelling because it's what we want. And this is the vision of the King. He envisions people freed, fed, and finding family. And that is what Jesus set out to do. And that is what the church is all about. And they continued, verse 46. They continued. It wasn't just like we did it for a week, we did it for 3 weeks. No, they continued. They continued. This was over and over and over devotion. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being freed. And this is the unmistakable mark of the early church. They were devoted to investing in and participating within the movement. They were devoted to investing in and participating within the movement of God. People who turn to Jesus devote themselves to a few different things. The first thing, if Jesus is your king, what you're doing is you're reorganizing everything around the kingdom. I used to do this, but in light of what I know, in light of who I follow, in light of the promise of continuing to follow the person that I think has freedom for me, I'm changing this. I'm shifting this because I want that future more than I want it, what this is providing me right now. And so we're reorganizing what needs to change, what needs to be rethought in light of the kingdom. The second thing we need to do, if we devote ourselves to this kingdom, is we need to participate in the kingdom. The church is a participatory experience where we are devoted to being a part of bringing and receiving. There's so many things that the church and churches want to give to you, and you need to receive, and you can only receive it by participation. The other thing that you do is you invest in the kingdom. You invest in the kingdom. You don't just receive. We don't just consume things that help us. We say, I'm going to invest in it. I'm going to help someone. I'm going to give. I'm going to serve because I know the benefit of the kingdom in my life, and I know what the way of Jesus does for me, and I so badly want it to be for someone else, especially someone who's broken and hurting and doesn't have community and doesn't have purpose. And I'm just going to invest in it. I'm just going to help make that a reality. And then here's what we do. And you don't like to admit this, neither do I, but it's what we do. We wait for a return. We do, because that's what we do. When we invest in things, we constantly ask the question, what will the return be? Will I get out what I put in? Will there be more? Will it be a good investment? And so here is my question. If this is true, if this is the vision of the kingdom, why are we not more devoted to this? Like, if this is the way of Jesus and he's your king, like, why are followers of Jesus not invested more in this? And maybe you are, interested and, devoted, but what happens? Our devotion slows. It starts to stop at times or in certain areas. And we struggle. We do. We struggle with continuing this kind of devotion because of this thing we've talked about already, because what's the return on investment? We want to know what the return is. What is the return going to be? And here's the truth. This is why it's so hard to continue in devotion to anything. If we don't see returns immediately, we start to wonder, should I be doing this? Is this the right way? Is this going to help me? Is this going to get me what I actually need? If we don't see it now, our investments, we start to go, whoa. Is this the right thing? Maybe I should do something. Maybe I should pay attention to something else. Or something else gets our attention. And that something else promises us a return. And so we go for it because we want a return. We want a return and as soon as possible return. But here's the truth, and I hope this helps. Sometimes the return is now. Sometimes it is now. Sometimes, when you pay attention to something and you're at, you've had this an experience or you read something or you're with the church or, whatever, like it was an immediate return. You're like, oh my gosh, God spoke to me, or oh my gosh, my life changed, or oh my gosh, like I made this change and it was an immediate return and now I'm living a better way and I see it, I walked away, I gave this up and now like the return is now. I feel it, I see how much better I am now. Sometimes the return is now. Sometimes the return is later. When you parent your kids, sometimes the return is later. When you read the Bible and you're trying to follow Jesus, isn't this true? Sometimes we read it and we go, what did I just read? I got nothing out of that. And then we go, oh, maybe it's just a bad day or whatever, close it up. Next day, oh, I'm devoted to this. I'm going to keep doing this. And we flip it open and we go, I don't know. Next day, the same. And then sometimes we're tempted to stop. But then 4 months later, when we're in a situation, guess what we think about? That verse we had no idea that we were going to need 4 months later. Sometimes the return is later. And sometimes the return is different. We are putting something in, and we're expecting a certain kind of return, but sometimes the return is different. Sometimes the return is a lesson. Sometimes you learn something about you. Sometimes you learn something that you're going to need later on in life or for someone else. Sometimes the return is growth. You needed to see something about yourself. so you can be more like Jesus. Sometimes the return is, I am now the kind of person that is more sensitive and empathetic to my fellow human being. Sometimes that's the return. And finally, sometimes the return is the participation. There are some things you will never experience a return on unless you're participating in. There are some things that are like that. You can never redo the birth of your child. There's some things that the reward is only in the participation. You can't always recreate that worship experience. You can't always redo that, that thing. Like sometimes you have to be there and present and a part of. Sometimes the return is the participation. Now, when the pandemic hit in March 2020, I remember looking at the stock market and watching it just dive overnight. You'll remember this. And it was, sort of bottoming out. There was a lot of people who were panicking. And they were, selling everything, and stocks were going so low. And then there were some people who did not panic. And they made investments at that time. And I remember at that time thinking, man, I really want to invest in something. Like, I feel like this is a great time to invest in something because, it's probably going to go back up and whatever. And I really wanted to invest in this company called Tesla. And several people did in that time. And then they waited, and they made a huge return on investment. If you invested $1,000 in March of 2020 in the company Tesla, they make electric cars, you currently would have around $13,000. Just two years. That's a pretty good return. I'll take it, right? Now, if you were really good at predicting things and sensing where you should be directing and focusing, if you invested in Tesla in 2012, you would have $148,755. Some of you are texting your financial person and firing them right now. Like, where were you? Where were you on advising me on this company? But I bring this up to say this. You may not know the impact of your investment today, but you will someday. You will someday. And while I watched people invest, I was too timid, and I was too afraid. I was too unsure. I was worried about losing something or risking something. And every week, do you know what I was devoted to? I was devoted to watching people invest, not participating in all of that. And I missed out. Don't get to the end of your life with an attention deficit. What do I mean? I mean, when you get to the end of your life, choose what your deficit is going to be. You can't pay attention to everything. Right now, in this time, today, you have an opportunity to choose what your devotion will be. All of us are going to have to choose. What am I going to give my attention to? What is it going to cost me? What will I not have if I pay attention to this? Choose your devotion. Don't be handed a deficit at the end of your life. Don't get to the end of your life and say, I paid attention to the wrong things. Don't get to the end of your life and say, I was devoted to the wrong things. You don't want to be there at the end of your life and go, I intended to, but I was devoted to something else. I intended to invest in my marriage. I intended to invest in my wife or my sister. I intended to be a mentor for someone who I know could use a mentor. Or I intended to seek someone out to help guide me. I intended to be a good friend, but I was devoted to something else. I intended to be more serious about my relationship with God and my faith, but I was too distracted. I was too busy. I was too reliant upon whatever immediately gratified me, and I missed it. And when I missed it, I missed the most important thing. The thing that I need to be paying attention to. Yeah, sure, I served once in a while. I read my Bible once in a while. I prayed every so often, but I was devoted to other things. Don't get to the end of your life with that kind of regret. So what has your attention? What has your attention? Because whatever has your attention, it has your devotion. All of us will pay attention. What do we need to do? We need to devote to what has the best return. Devote to what has the best return. And no one can give a better return than God. There is always a return to investing and following Jesus and following the way of Jesus, because God's kingdom doesn't experience recession, it doesn't decay, and it won't return to you void. Being invested in the kingdom of God and following the way of Jesus in your life, it will make your marriage better. At least it will make you a better married person. It will make you a better parent. It will make you a better student, a better friend, a more compassionate human being. It will help you make a difference. You will experience growth. You will see your own transformation, and you will witness others' transformation. Being invested in the kingdom is the best return. So devote to what has the best return. So what are we going to do? We are going to devote to what has the best return. We are going to rethink everything in light of the kingdom. I will invest for the long term, not focusing on what I get out of it today, but I will invest in what I know will produce the returns I need for the future. I will not just invest from a distance, but I'll participate in. I have a part to play. Somebody needs me, a part of this community, and I'm going to not just be part in, I'm going to be all in. And I will devote my attention. I will devote my attention to what I want most. And I will not get distracted and choose a deficit that I don't want at the end of my life. I will choose a devotion. And imagine if your marriage, imagine if your kids had your full attention and your full devotion. Imagine what that could do. Day after day, continuing to be devoted. And imagine the church. If we as followers of Jesus, if we were fully in, fully participating, fully creating the community that we see and ask, could you imagine the people on the outside of the church trying to figure life out, looking into the church and seeing people who are full of joy and full of life and have great relationships and they're doing something different? Like if you were that person, wouldn't you ask, what are you investing in? Because I'm empty. I want some of that. I want to experience that kind of return. And so whether you're here today, you don't have a relationship with Jesus, it's a great place to start. We'd love to have a conversation with you. Nothing will return better than following Jesus in your life. And if you want to talk to somebody, we'll have some people in the 103, which is right back there. Maybe you're here today and you need to rethink something. You need to think about where your attention is. And as we're singing a song, you need to be praying. God, what is it? What needs to have my attention? What doesn't need to have my attention? What do I need to surrender so I can focus more on the things that I want most? Would you stand and let's sing together?